So today we're going to take a look at what's going to happen if the US tries to form an empire in 2025. This video is going to be very unrealistic. All the events that are going to happen are purely fictional. Let's see who they declare war on, how they expand, and all those other stuff. Before we get into this video, I want to mention that major alliances like NATO, CSTO, the EU, or the UN, they do not exist in my videos. If they would exist, they would not let these countries to expand. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and to the second channel where I'm uploading Age of History 3 videos. But yeah, now let's get right into the video. And as we can see here, the United States is the strongest country in the world, economically and military wise. They won't even have to militarize because already they're spending so much money on their military. Their defense budget is #1 in the world. Without even having to prepare, we can see that they of course start things off with declaring war on Canada. And guys, this is a fictional scenario. This may not happen in real life, but yeah, let's see what happens here. We can see that right after declaring war on the Canadians, the US military was right on the border, and we can see that they start to push in. They push in from the eastern parts, securing all of these regions. These are some of the highly populated regions of Canada. We can also see that they push in from here, securing these regions. The Canadian military is unable to push these guys back because, well, it's the US military. And at last, we can see that the US military pushes in from here. And again, these are the highly populated regions of Canada. They start to push down from here, and the Canadians are, well, heavily outnumbered. And eventually, after fighting for a very long time, we can see that the Canadians lost their capital city of Ottawa. That was unfortunate. And from this point, the US military easily makes a lot of progress, pushing in from all sides. Well, the highly populated regions are being captured. Now an all-out assault happens. They also start to push down from Alaska, connecting with the mainland now, and Canada was crippling. These troops push up, cutting Canada into two parts. But eventually, after all of this chaos, we can see that the remaining parts of Canada surrender, as there was pretty much nothing significant left to defend. They lost their capital city alongside with some major cities, and now the entirety of Canada is under the US control. And in a peace negotiation, we can see that all of Canada got completely annexed by the US empire. Yeah, I have made a video about the US forming an empire, but that was for 2024. This is for 2025. It's with new animations and stuff, so yeah, if this video gets enough support, I'm gonna be remaking some of the other videos that I did, like the UK forming an empire. After annexing Canada, the US looks pretty big. As of right now, it's the biggest country in the world, land-wise. That's still nothing compared to what they want, and they want a lot. We can see that they want to first dominate in North America, for which they now lay their eyes on Greenland, which technically is in North America, but it's controlled by Denmark, so that is unfortunate for the United States. But hey, guess what? Yeah, this kind of happens. And since this happens, this too happens, and we can see that the US is now at war with Denmark, and things are not looking good for Denmark. We can see that the US Navy, which by the way is the strongest in the world, now has arrived on the coast of Greenland. They do make a naval landing down in the south, and they were easily able to push around, securing a lot of these regions. They push into the western parts too. The temperature is pretty harsh, but they were still able to secure all of these regions, and these were the highly populated regions of Greenland. It won't be necessary to push up because literally there is nothing up here. And yeah, after the US made all of this progress, the Danish do realize that they simply can't win this war. They can't keep on defending Greenland, and because they are now fearing a direct war with the US on their shores, the Danish surrender, and then technically Greenland also surrenders. So let's see. Well, yeah, there's actually nothing to see here because we all knew that Greenland was eventually gonna get annexed by the United States because they want control over North America. And after annexing the entire country, or territory I guess, the US feels even more confident. In Europe, we can see that some countries are really concerned about what's going on in North America. The US in the future might want to take over these countries, which pretty much is possible. But okay, we're gonna leave that for now, and let's see what the US is gonna be doing in North America. And well, now we can see that they're gonna be sending out some ultimatums. These ultimatums are gonna be sent to these Caribbean islands. Pretty much everyone had to accept the ultimatum, but amongst the countries who got an ultimatum, there was Cuba too. And yeah, they didn't accept the ultimatum. They basically told the United States to flip off. Because they did not accept the ultimatum, we can see that the US now declares war on Cuba. Very unfortunate for these guys, but they declined the ultimatum. So let's see. We can see that the US Navy now comes out and they're going around the entire island. We can see that at this point they have completely surrounded Cuba. They're planning to make naval landings. They do just that, as we can see that they make a naval landing in the eastern parts where they now start to push in. They are met with some resistance, but because the Cuban military was mostly concentrated down here, the US takes an advantage of that, making another naval landing up here, and then they start to push down. Eventually they get to an undefended Havana. They take the capital city of Cuba, and because of this, the morale amongst these soldiers was at its all-time lowest. They couldn't continue fighting, and so the remaining parts of Cuba surrender to the United States. They annex all of Cuba too, which pretty much was their initial goal, and thus the United States is continuing their expansion. They're done with the Caribbean islands. They don't want these guys for now, and the only option that they got right now is either to push down into Europe, or they can start pushing down in North America. And if you're gonna ask these guys right now, they would definitely say that they want to push down, and because they wanted to push down, eventually we can see that they declare war on Mexico. This is a pretty good option for the US if they wanted to expand, as the Mexicans are nowhere near as strong as the United States. So let's see. We can see that the US military now has arrived on the border with Mexico. The US Navy is also active here, but they start off with pushing down from here and they push down the coast. The Mexicans are unable to push these guys back. They also push down from here, cutting off Baja California from mainland Mexico, and they continue their push until eventually this region surrenders and these troops come back and start pushing down. Eventually, the far superior US Navy now has arrived on the coast of Mexico here. They make a naval landing and they start pushing into the highly populated regions of Mexico. I'm pretty sure these are highly populated regions, and unfortunately now Mexico is fighting a two-front war, maybe even a three-front war. The US troops here continue their push down. They are met with some resistance, but come on, it's the US. They're well known for their military. The US troops here also continue their push, taking city after city here, and the Mexicans are unable to push these guys back. These troops also push down the coast, making their own push down, but now the US comes up with a solid plan. It's to basically take the capital city, and this army all combined now pushes in till eventually they get to the capital city. They take it with relative ease because the Mexican army was split up. This army continues its push until finally most of the troops here surrender to the Americans, and these troops continue their push in. They cut off these parts of Mexico from the southern parts. These parts surrender, and yeah, after knowing that they could have never won this war, the Mexicans go ahead and surrender, and thus the US-Mexican war comes to an end. The war resulted in an American victory, of course. In a peace treaty, we can see that all of Mexico got completely annexed by the United States. The US started off with this. Now they have all of this. Still not enough, but they're still expanding. And now, to have full control over the entirety of North America, we can see that the US sends ultimatum to all of these Central American countries. The first one to accept was Panama, followed by Costa Rica. We can see that Belize accepts the ultimatum. Nicaragua says no, and thus the US declares war on these guys. El Salvador says yes. Guatemala and Honduras, they accept the ultimatums. But look at this. Actually, the government of Nicaragua just gets obliterated by its own people who are totally not in support with this war with the United States. Of course, who would be? The government was overthrown, and yeah, ultimately they also surrender. And would you look at this? Pretty much North America is just the United States now, minus these islands, which the US does not want. The US still wants more, but after the Central American campaign, which was not a campaign, they just literally got these countries by sending letters. The US now turns its focus into South America, where they had ongoing tensions with Venezuela, and we all know how this is gonna be. Ultimately, the US declares war on Venezuela. Not gonna lie, Venezuela has some pretty decent amount of oil, but hey, the US is not here for oil. They're just here to liberate the country. So let's see. We can see that the US Navy now has arrived on the coast of Venezuela. They first take out this island, then they make a naval landing up here, and they start to push around. The far superior US military now pushes around, capturing the coastline of the Venezuelans and also securing the western regions, until finally the entire army is now focused on taking the capital city. They push in. Unfortunately for Venezuela, they lost their capital city. The US troops continue their push, taking city after city until eventually they get the entire coastline. These were the major parts. A few months go by, and this is all the progress made by the US military. After all of this chaos, once again we can see that the remaining parts of Venezuela surrender. Venezuela gets completely annexed into the US empire. And finally, to finish things off in the Americas, the US sends an ultimatum to Colombia. Not not demanding their annexation, but they want some parts of Colombia. Colombia had no other choice but to accept the ultimatum. And yeah, this is what Colombia looks like now. The US empire is fully connected, a lot of oil, a lot of military, a lot of new recruits from all of these different countries. Okay, so after all of these campaigns, we can see that they want some other countries, so they send out a few ultimatums. And now let's take a look at these new regions. Pretty much Liberia got taken out, so did Equatorial Guinea, minus the island, but the southern parts of Madagascar. This was taken after a war, and then Sri Lanka because of its strategic location. This is the US empire at its peak. So this is going to be it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you guys want to see in the future. And thank you for watching.